Okay, all right. So, firstly, I welcome you all into this revision session for Quiz 1 exam for this Modern Application Development 2 course. Well, what we generally do in these revision session, live sessions is that we generally walk through the mock papers. As the way those mock question papers are designed is they automatically cover all of the contents from the syllabus. So the syllabus for quiz one is weeks 1 to week 4. So the mock exam will basically consist of questions from all of these weeks, and we'll try to cover all of the fundamental concepts from all of those weeks that you can also expect to come in the quiz exams as well, and of course in the exam exams as well. So what we generally do is we just walk through that mock paper, and after that we start taking up your queries in case you have any. But before we start walking through that mock paper, I would like to know that how many of you have already attempted that mock paper since it has been there for a while now. Yes, it was released last week. Okay, Lakshmanandan has already attempted it. Is there anyone else? Okay, Shubham. Okay, Charles is there. Okay, so did you guys face any trouble attempting that mock paper? Was there any question that caused any trouble to you? Okay, question 6, JavaScript is. Okay. All right. So hopefully, whoever has not done it yet, I hope they will get that advantage of this session, and we will be walking through each of those questions, and we'll discuss about each question in detail. Okay. So let me open the question paper. Okay. All right. So is my browser screen visible to you guys? Okay. Great.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we will be having a total of 16 questions, as we usually have in quiz exams too. Uh, all right, so we will start with the very first question here. Let me try if I can reduce the size so that we can see all of the code in a single window. Seems okay. Okay, so let us just read the question first. So it is saying that consider the following JavaScript program, and we have to predict the output if we will try to execute this program. So what will happen? Let's look at this program and see what is happening. What we are doing here is we are creating two objects or two constant objects. First object is A, second object is B. Both of these objects are defining a set of properties. The first object A is defining a property named x1, which is having a value 10, having a number value 10 instead. And the other property that object A is defining is func1, and it is defined to be a function. What this function does is it just displays the value of this dot x1 to the console. Similarly, if we talk about B object, it also has a property named x1 like A has, and it has been initialized with the value number 20. The const A function had a property named func1, but here const B object, it has a property named func2. It is again a function, but the definition of this function is a bit different than func1 of A object. So what this is doing is this is saying that A dot func1, that means it is trying to reference the function that is defined inside A object, and it is trying to assign the reference of it to a variable called C. And what it is doing is it is calling that function by using the apply method. In apply method, it is passing B as the very first argument, and after that it is passing an array having just one element, that is 10. And at last what this program does is because whenever we are creating these objects, ultimately we will have to make use of these objects somewhere. Otherwise, of course, there is no point defining them. So the main statement of this program that is going to do all of the work is this last statement that says b.func2. That means what we are doing here is we are trying to invoke a function named func2 with the reference of b. That means there must be a function named func2 which is defined inside an object named b. So as soon as this statement gets executed, what will happen is the control will enter into this function body, that is this func2 function. And here we have already discussed that what this line is doing, this a.func1, it is basically taking the reference of this func1 function defined in constant object a, and it is giving it to c. And then we are calling this apply method on this function, that is func1 reference. But what we are doing is we are passing b as the first argument, and as the second argument we are passing an array whose size is just 1 and which is having one element whose value is 10. So does anyone remember that what are the different arguments that we provide to this apply method? We have two more such methods in JavaScript. We have call and we also have bind. And apply is, of course, one of these three methods. So does anyone remember that why do we use any of these methods, call, apply, or bind?
Sir, to bind that method to a particular object. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Exactly. This is what we do. In case we want to invoke a function, but with the context of a different object. Because right now, if I'll ask you that you have to call this func1 function, and here, since this is a normal function, so this is always going to refer to what? It is always going to refer to the object in which it is defined in. So this is always going to refer to a. But what we do with the help of apply, call, and bind methods is that we try to change the definition of this reference here. That means this is not going to refer to the object in which they are defined in anymore, but we can define that value explicitly by providing that reference as the first argument to any of these methods, be it apply, be it bind, or the other one that is called. So that means what this b is a reference. What is a reference? Reference means which is going to override the old value of this reference. So if this was pointing to anything else, we don't need to worry about that now. But in case you want to understand what this should have been referring to, in normal cases, it should have been referring to the object in which it is defined, that is object A. But now what we are doing is we are passing B object. So what this will refer to is basically B. That means this object that we have defined afterwards. The first argument is going to define the value of this reference. But what about the second argument? We are passing an array here. Is it going to make any difference?
No, sir.
Yes, of course, it is not going to make any difference. The reason is the function that we are invoking here is not accepting any parameters or is not taking any parameters or arguments. As you can see, the definition of this func1 function defined here, basically the parameters are empty. There is nothing. So what we do in the next argument of this apply method is we basically pass an array of elements, and each of that element in that array is going to be copied to those parameters or arguments that this function is taking. But right now, since this function is not taking anything, you can just ignore this parameter, and this is what JavaScript will do too. Okay, this 10 will simply be ignored. Now, if this 10 is being ignored and we are just taking this b value or this b reference into the consideration, so what will happen is just the value of this will start referring to this object b. Now, the simple question to you is that if this is referring to b object, what this console.log this.x1 will do? What does it print?
20.
Yeah, exactly. It will be 20. So we have simplified this question. What we have done is we know that the reference of this has now been changed to b. So we can interpret this statement to with this.x1. Instead, we can interpret it as b.x1. And of course, if someone is saying b.x1, it is quite easy for us to answer what the value or the output will be. In this case, it is going to be 20 because b is an object, x1 is a property of that. You are trying to access that property using b reference which is of course an object. So you will get 20. And yeah, so the correct answer for this question would be 20. All right. So any issues with this question? Any issues, or shall we move forward?
No, sir, no.
Okay, great. So these, all of these three methods, call, apply, and bind, these are really important for you to understand. Well, at the end of this session, I'll probably try to summarize that what all concepts or what all basics at least one should be knowing in JavaScript. Okay, so this is again a second programming question, and here what we need to do is we again need to predict the output. So here we are also using this, and we are using this apply method. Okay, so let me now try to. Okay, so again we have a program that is looking like exactly same, which we saw in the previous question, but there seems to be some difference. Yes, the definition of these functions is a bit different this time. Let's see. So you will see both of those objects being defined again. We have an object A, which is defined as const. Again, we have an object B, which is defined as a constant object. Both of these objects are defining x1 properties. One object is defining the value of that property to be 10. The other object is defining the property to be 20. Func1 function inside the A object is defining some function definition which says that console.log 5 plus this.x1. So again, if I talk about normal cases, this should be referring to the object in which it is defined. It should be A, but of course we will try to change this reference. We'll see what the value of this will become. And in object B, what we do is the way we write the implementation or the definition of this func2 function is we take the reference of func1 function using object A and we assign it to an object C or yeah, a variable C. And after that, what we do is we simply say c.apply and we don't pass anything here. This function is also not accepting anything here. So that's why what we are doing is we are simply leaving the apply method empty. So again, this is a question to you. What happens in case we do not provide any reference to call, apply, or bind? What will be the value of this?
So nothing will be there, na?
Yes, it will be, yeah, means we are not passing anything. So what do you think? What the value of this would be? Because the first argument should be the value of this. But since we are not providing anything, so do you think this will become undefined?
This should become undefined.
Okay. Anyone else want to give their suggestions? Can you please mention the difference between apply and bind? Okay, so the difference between apply and bind is the moment you call the apply function, it automatically invokes the underlying function. That means if I'm saying c.apply, then what this is doing is this is calling the function what C has. But in case if I would have been calling bind here, so bind does not invoke the function directly. What it does is it instead return a function. It instead return a function, and then we will have to call that function once again. So in case you will have to, you know, uh, replace this apply with bind here, what you should be doing here is, let me write it in the chat for you. So suppose c dot bind, you will be required to do something like this. You will be required to use two set of parentheses, because one set of parentheses will be used with bind to provide the value for this and whatever arguments. And since it returns a function as the result, you will have to again use a set of parentheses to invoke the function that was returned. So this is basically the difference between apply and bind. And if you talk about the difference between call and apply, so there is just one difference. The difference is that the way you pass the arguments in both of these methods, in call, you have to pass all of those values of parameters as individual elements. But in case of apply, you need to pass it as an iterable in the form of an array. Okay, so Nivedita is saying that the output of this question would be 15. But yeah, the question is that how does it come to be 15 if that's the answer? Okay, yeah. So what we were discussing is that if we don't pass anything to the apply method, or let's say even call method or bind method, what will be the value that will be given to this reference inside the function that you are invoking? So C is referring to func1, and here we are making use of this. So what this is going to refer? Can someone answer?
10.
Okay, so you are saying it will refer 10. Why?
Since we didn't pass any parameter, so it will take x1 from a const a only.
Okay, all right. Does anyone else has to say anything?
Sir, here this will be not referring to any object because we are not passing any object inside it.
Okay, but this should be referring to some object, right? It
So,
should be.
so here it will be like by default it will go to the Windows object then.
Okay, all right. Mohit is also saying that x110 will be referenced. All right. Anyone else having any other different inputs than what we have discussed so far? So two different inputs that we have gotten so far is that this is going to refer to A, and Abhishek suggested that this is going to refer to the window object, or you can instead say global object in case you are talking about a general JavaScript. Window, we can call it when you are considering browser to be your environment. Is there any other suggestion or any other guess what this can refer to? Okay. All right. So what Abhishek said is correct here. In case you are not passing anything to call, apply, or bind, what this does is the value of this is automatically referenced to the global object. Okay, this happens in all such methods, that is call, apply, and bind. If you are not providing any value of this, then it will implicitly be considered to be a global object. So since this is referring to global object here, ultimately we are invoking this function only, and we have to predict the output once this function is invoked. What we are doing is we have to first access the value of this dot x1. Now since this is referring to global object, we have to find out a value named x1 that is a property of global object. Now, of course, x1 is not something that the global object will automatically or implicitly define for you. It has to be something that should be explicitly defined by the programmer or the user. And in this program, we are not creating a property named x1 for the global object. We are creating it for two objects, two user-defined objects, A and B. But we are not doing it for the global object. So if I ask you that I have an object and I am trying to access a property of that object which I have not defined. Let's say I am defining this object A. I have defined two properties x1 and func1. Now if I ask you that what will happen if I try to display the value a.x2, what will happen? What will a.x2 refer to in this program?
None, because there's nothing defined. So even x1 also will refer to nothing.
Okay, none will come in Python.
It should return undefined.
Undefined.
Yeah, it will be undefined. Correct. So similarly, okay, let us just talk about the first case. In case you are trying to access a property via an object which is not explicitly defined, what is that property going to display is or going to refer is the value undefined, because that was never defined. Okay. Similarly, in this case, that is this dot x1, this is referring to global object. X1 is a property that we are trying to access via global object. We have not defined this property anywhere in the global object. So this dot expression, this dot x1 or this expression is going to give us the value undefined. Now, this whole expression comes down to what? 5 plus undefined. So what will be the value of 5 plus undefined? Oh, this is the next question to you.
It will be undefined.
5 plus undefined. What you are doing is you are trying to add undefined value to a number.
Yeah.
So do you think you can add any other value to a number other than number?
No.
In that case, what it gives us is it gives us a name value. That is not a number. Okay, because what you are doing is you are saying 5 plus this.x1, that is undefined. So 5 plus undefined. You are trying to add an invalid operand to a number. So that is why the result will come out to be NaN, not a number.
So suppose the call is console.log just this.x1, it will be undefined. But
It will
since
be
we are adding 5 plus x dot this.x1, it is NaN.
exactly. So the output or the answer for this question is going to be NaN. Oh, sorry, not a number.
So I have a doubt here.
Yes, please.
As you mentioned, like this dot x1, here x1 will refer to the global x1, right?
Yes,
Uh, but isn't there a hierarchical reference mechanism? Like if they do not find it globally, then shouldn't it the program look into the local? Because we
no,
have x1 defined at local level, and
no.
then there. Okay.
See, what is happening here is you are explicitly saying that I want to access the x1 property of this object. And since this object here is global object, it is not going to look anywhere else if that property is not found in that object. Similarly, if I'll ask you, let's say I define x2 property in this B object, and I say I want to access a dot x2. Since x2 does not exist in A, do you think that it is going to, look into other objects, let's say B, where x2 is defined? No, it won't.
No, I don't.
So this is an object, and we are trying to access a specific property in that object. If that is not found, then it is going to give us undefined.
Okay, so how to access the x1, the local object of A? X1,
In
which
this
is
function,
declared.
since you can say that this is referring to global object and you want to explicitly define this property, what you can do is just before this console.log statement, you can just write this dot x1 to be something. After that, this dot x1 is going to refer to the value that you just have defined in that statement, and the output will change. So this is just one method. In case you want to access the global object outside, but if you are trying to execute that program as a script, it is probably difficult for you to access that. But in case you are trying to execute your program in a REPL environment, in that case, you can just create any variable using var keyword, and it will automatically be added as a property to the global object.
Makes sense.
So
Thank you.
instead of c dot apply, instead if we did c open bracket close bracket, it would print 25, right?
So if you just call C function here, then it is going to give you 5 plus 10. So it will give you 15. Yeah.
20, right? It will refer to the current, because this will be in B, right? Or no?
No, it should give you 15. Because what
Okay.
you are doing is you are just assigning this function into a different function.
Yeah.
So you are not changing the value of this. This will remain the same.
Okay.
Okay. So any other confusions on this question?
No, sir.
All right. So
Sir,
I guess
how would you define this dot x1 in global?
okay, I just answered that question a few seconds ago. So in case you are running this program in a script, then it will be difficult for you to directly access the global object. But if you are running this program in a REPL environment, then you can create any variable outside any function using keyword var. Then that object will automatically be added to the global object, or that property will be added to the global object. Or in case you want to change the property or add this property named x1, what you can do is you can just include one more statement just before this console.log, because inside this function, this is referring to global object. So if you will write this dot x1 or this dot x2 or this dot x3, anything, all of these are going to refer to the global object, and they will ultimately add a new property to the global object if that does not exist. If it exists, it is going to update that property or edit.
Yeah, next question actually has that question. The next question mark has that global.
Okay, it has that. All right, okay. So we'll discuss that. So shall we move forward in case this is clear?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is a simple program. Okay, not a simple program. Anyway, this is going to create confusions. Well, let us see. Consider the following JavaScript program and predict the output if executed. So what we are doing here is we are creating an object or a variable x using keyword where, and we are defining its value or initializing its value with 5. After that, we create an object. We define one more property in that object, that is x itself, and we define the value to be 10. Then we have a property named func, which is actually a function. Remember, this is an arrow function. Okay, this is an arrow function. This is not a normal function. And after that, what we do is we do object.func and we pass this 20 here. And after that, we ask that what will be the value of x and obj.x. Now, there are two different angles to which you can look at this question. The first angle is, or the first case is, when you are trying to execute this program as a script. Okay. And the second case is when you are trying to execute this program in a command line interface, let's say Node, or yeah, let's say Node, and basically you are trying to execute it in a REPL environment. Or the other example for that would be if you're trying to execute in a browser console, then of course it will behave the same as it would do in REPL environment. Okay. So we will first talk about the Node environment, okay, or the REPL environment, where what happens is whenever you create a variable using keyword where, that variable or that property is basically added as a property to the global object. So considering this program is being executed in the browser console, what will happen is the moment first line is executed, variable x equals to 10, or let me just try to show you instead. I guess I have already discussed it in one of the live sessions, but let me just discuss it here too. Are you able to see this browser console here? One second, you are not able to see.
No, sir, we are able to see.
Okay, you can see.
Like the wallpaper, we can see.
Okay. Let me just open the console. Are you able to see the console now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, firstly, if I say, I will just type window here. And window, what you are able to see is this is basically a global object for you. Right? Or instead, to not confuse you very much this time here, you can just write global. Not this. Here we have to, okay, so since we are inside browser, so we will have to use window only. All right, so inside this window, what you can see here is that there is basically nothing that is defined with the name A, right? Because if there would have been something with name A, that should have come on the top here, right? So what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a variable using keyword where. So I'll create one var A equals to, let's say, 9. After doing this, okay, so what it is returning is it is returning undefined, but we don't have to do anything with this. I try to print the value of window object again, and this time you will see a small difference. You will see that A has now come here, right? And it is saying that the value of A is 9. This is what we actually defined in the previous step that we executed. So what this is showing us is that any variable created using where keyword is added as a property to this window object. Now you will ask me the question that if I do it using let or const, won't that happen? No, it won't. Let me try to show you. I'll create something with B and I'll assign it to be 10. And I again show you the window object. Here you will see that there is nothing like B. Okay. The same thing will happen with const. If you try to define something with const, it also won't appear here. So one thing that should be clear by now is that any variable created using where keyword outside a function in a REPL environment is added as a property to the global object. Okay. So this is what should be clear to you. But in case we try to execute it as a script, this does not happen. The reason we have already discussed in one of the sessions. I'll just try to give you a brief of that concept too when we'll discuss the other case. That means when we'll discuss the script case. But right now we are discussing the case when we are trying to execute this program in a REPL environment. Okay. So let us just come back. So you saw that if we are executing it in a REPL environment, this variable x will be added to the global object. Okay, and global or window.x is going to give us 5. Is this thing clear? Is this thing clear?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Now, what happens is we create an object with name obj. We define two properties x and func. We'll come on to those later when we will work with these properties. Let's see. As the next step, what we do is we are referring or we are invoking this function instead called func using the reference obj. So that means this func must be a function that is defined inside an object called obj. So yes, we have it defined here. And what we do is we pass an argument 20, right, to this function. So this is an arrow function which is accepting one argument and the value of that argument is 20. So we call this function and there is just one statement that is written inside this function, a quite simple one, that is this dot x equals to x. That means whatever you are getting as the argument, just assign it to what? Assign it to this dot x. Okay. Now the question here is that what this is referring to.
Global object, global variable x.
No, sir. It will apply to the function because we are calling it with the object func.
But
Okay.
in one of the session, it was mentioned that the scope for this function in an arrow function is global, right?
Okay.
Ouch. Oh, yeah. That's true.
All right. So what we are using here is we are using an arrow function. And you should remember is that if we are using an arrow function, does not matter what the value of this is. It is always going to be inherited from the enclosing context, right? Or the parent context. So if we talk about what is the parent context of this func function, what is it? This obj is its current context, but what is the parent? Where is this
Global.
obj
Global.
object defined?
It's a global.
It is the global. So ultimately, this is referring to the global object here. So this dot x means, okay, remember we already have added a property named x in the global object before by creating that variable using the keyword var. Remember we are executing this program in a REPL environment. Okay. So this dot x, what will it do is it will now overwrite this old value from 5 to what? What the new value we are getting here is 20. So this is going to overwrite the value of x from 5 to 20 here. Okay, so this is what this statement will do. When we execute this statement, what it does is it invokes this function. Since we are invoking it, the control will get inside this function and it is going to execute this statement, which will overwrite the value of this variable x. Okay. Now, the question here is that what will be the value of x and what will be the value of obj.x. So obj.x, there is no difficulty for anyone to answer here. Obj.x is always going to refer to what 10 because we are using an arrow function and it is not going to change the x property here. Okay, so obj.x is definitely going to remain as 10. But what is the value of x is a question for you.
Will be 20 because that is what we have
It will be 20. Yes, of course. We have changed that value from 5 to 20 here and we are just trying to access that now. So what the output will be? Output will be 20 and 10. So the output is 20 and 10. But wait, this is not the only output possible here because the question does not mention anything in itself that whether the program is being executed in the REPL environment or in the script environment. Okay, so this is one possible answer. Of course, if you will try to select this answer, you will get full marks, but there is another answer possible for this question and let us discuss about that case now. Now the next case is that we are trying to execute this program in a script environment, or what we basically do is we copy this entire program, we paste it in a file named, let's say abc.js, and we say node abc.js. That means we are trying to execute this program as a script. Now, what happens when we try to execute a program as a script? I discussed it in one of the sessions as well. Let me try to show that here too. So okay, wait. This is what happens when you try to execute your program in a script. Whatever you code inside the script or inside the file that is saved with an extension .js, what happens is all of its code is put into this function definition here. So what is this function? This function is basically an anonymous function, and all of that script file content is put into this function definition. But remember, we are using the syntax of an IAFE, immediately invoked function expression, right? That means we are executing this function right at the same step wherever we are defining it. So if you put everything or the content of that JS file into this function. So remember when I was telling you that if you define any variable using the keyword where, it will automatically be added to the property of the global object. But I also mentioned one exception if this variable is defined outside a function. Right? Because if we say that a variable is defined inside a function, then the scope of this variable, it becomes limited to that function itself. Right? Because any variable created using where keyword is having a functional scope. Okay. So just a minute. Yeah, sorry for the delay. So yeah, what I was saying is, yes, so any variable declared using keyword where outside a function is added as a property to the global object. But if that variable is defined inside a function, so remember that variables created using where are having functional scope. That means their scope will be limited to that function itself wherever they are created. Right? So if that happens, then that variable won't be added to the global object, right? Because it cannot be accessed anywhere outside that function. So this is exactly what will happen in case of script, because doesn't matter how many variables you create using where keyword, they're ultimately going to be put inside a function definition. And since the scope of this variable will be limited to this function itself, it won't be added as a property to the global object. Okay. So in that case, what you are doing is you are basically creating a local variable inside that function if you are trying to execute a program in the script mode. So now the thing that you should be able to understand from here is that if you are trying to execute a program in a script mode and you create variables using keyword where outside the functions, then they won't be added to the global object as the properties. The reason is because all of that content of the JS file will be put into this function definition or into this function implementation, and any variable defined using where inside a function will be having a local scope or will be having a functional scope, so that will be limited to that function definition itself. Right? So that's why it won't be added to the global object. So let us come back. So we are talking about the script mode. So if you do so, variable x equals to 5, what we are doing here is, you are just creating a local variable named x. Right? This is a local variable, right? This is not a,
Sir,
yes.
your screen is not visible. The
Is it visible now?
yes, sir.
Okay. So now this variable x equals to 5 is not a global variable. It is basically a variable or a local variable inside a function, right? This is what you can assume now. So since this is a local variable, this won't be added to the global object property. So we have an object here. What we do is we say obj.func and then we call this 20. Okay. And now what we do is, since we are calling this function and this dot x, so again this has to take its value from the enclosing context. So can someone tell me what is going to be the enclosing context? Again, I would
Obj.
like to take you to the, sorry?
Obj. It's going to be obj.
No, why it's going to be obj? One second. Obj is its current scope.
Okay, this will take the function context.
Yeah. So since I was calling this function here, how I was calling it, I was providing it two references or two objects. One is obj and the other one is also obj. So just forget about the second argument, because this is something that this function gets as an argument. So let's say if this is getting this obj here, something like this. Okay. But what is this obj? Because this obj is going to define what the value of this will refer to. Right? Because whatever contents that you are writing will be pasted into this function definition here. And the value of this here is going to refer to what this obj is referring to. So this obj is what? This is nothing. This is just a temporary object, and it is basically a an empty object here. Okay, so this obj is an empty object which is being passed as the first argument to this call method, and which is being used along with an IIFE. So that means the value of this inside this function is going to be referring to this obj object, which is an empty object. Okay. Again, let us come back. Assuming that again here the global object that we are trying to understand here basically does not come into play. So here this dot x is not referring to global object. What is it? It is referring to is, it is referring to an empty object. Right, because we just saw that when this code will be pasted inside a function definition, and an empty object reference will be provided to that function using call method, so that empty object will define the value of this inside that function. And what we are talking about it, what will be the value here in the outside level of this object? So here the value of this is referring to what? Is referring to that empty object that was passed to that IIFE in the example that we just saw. So this dot x is what? This is basically an empty object, and what you are doing is, since this is an empty object, you are creating or adding a property named x to it, and the value to that property would be 20. Is this correct?
Can we create it, or will it be a reference error because there's no empty object? You can't.
No, you have to understand that this is how it will internally work. So you won't get any error. This is how it will internally work. So JavaScript will automatically create this empty object for you. This is something that is happening implicitly. JavaScript engine is doing it for you. You don't need to worry about it. It is creating this object. It is creating a syntax like this or an organization like this, and is executing this code. Okay. So now this is referring to that empty object. This dot x, what it does is, it just adds a property named x to that empty object. So now that empty object is having a property named x whose value is 20. But what happens if you try to print the value of x in obj.x? Obj.x, no second opinion, it will of course be referring to the 10 value. But what this x is going to refer now? Will the x refer
the
to
original 20? Yeah, 5.
It is going to refer to 5. Yes, because if we would want to access the value that we changed here, so you would have to write here this dot x, then you will be able to get 20. But since we are just writing x here, so this x is referring to what? The variable that you created in the first line here, in the first statement. So it is 5. So that's why the output here will be 5 and 10. Remember, both of these outputs are true. 20 and 10 is true in case you are executing it in a REPL environment. 5 and 10 is true when you are executing it in a script environment. So both of these outputs are correct. If you select any of these options, any of these A and B options, you are going to get the full marks for this question. So yes, now any doubts in this question?
No, sir. Quite. I think this needs far more understanding.
Yes, yeah.
So can you tell me what this dot x gives actually? Like usually my understanding is this dot x gives a value of that the variable or the object, right?
Correct? Yeah.
But here, where you say this dot x, it's you are referring it to x.
This dot x here.
Yeah, here.
Okay. This here. Forget about x part of it. This is referring to an empty object if we are talking about script environment. So this is always going to refer to an object. Okay. It will always be an object. And as you know, what we do in object is we add properties in that object. So if this, considering this to be an object, what you are doing is you are either updating an existing property or you are creating a new property. This is what do you mean by having a syntax like this dot x equals to, forget about what the value is. If you write this dot x equals to, then what it is doing is it is either updating an existing property or adding a new property to an object that is referenced by this here. This must be referring to an object in every case. Does not matter whether you execute it in a REPL environment or a script environment. This is always going to refer to an object. It will either be a global object, it will either be a user defined object, or it will either be an empty object that is created by JavaScript to execute your script program.
So had this been on the right side, it would have taken a value. Since it's on the left side, it takes the property of the object. Is that how I should understand this?
Yes. So the associativity of this equals to operator here is basically right to left. That means whatever the value of right hand side expression comes, it will be copied to left hand side expression. So what the value of x is will be copied to this dot x. If this dot x would have been on the right side here, then the value of this dot x would be copied into x.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And this entire thing will change if there is not an arrow function but a named function or a defined function.
So if this would have been
Yes.
a normal function you were talking about. Okay, so if this is a normal function, so this is going to refer to obj here. So obj.x value will change. X will remain the same. In case you are talking about script environment, x will remain the same to be 5, but obj.x will become 20 in that case.
Okay, got it.
So any confusions in this question now?
Sir,
I guess someone mentioned in the beginning of this session. Yeah, yes.
so
Please.
just one thing in arrow function, what I understood is it will be any this that is declared inside the arrow function, it will be referring to the parent normal function.
It is going to refer to the parent normal function. I did not get it.
Parent normal function, by that I means like any normal function which is declared above it.
If it is not declared,
Then it will go to the windows.
okay, so you are trying to mix the script and the REPL environment here.
Not sir, actually I am sticking to the script part. It's not script, the REPL part. The where we use the REPL is the one we use for Google Chrome
Give me a
console.
minute, Abhishek. Just give me a minute, please. Yeah, sorry, Abhishek, I got a call. So yeah, can you please continue what we were discussing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I'm just copy pasting a code inside the chat. One second.
Uh, okay, so you have an object obj. Title. Okay, I'll have to look at its indentation once. Yes. So what do you want to ask in this?
Sir, my question is forget about the not simple part that I just wrote for my to some experiment. But my question is inside the simple. I am creating another object inside simple, and inside like the attribute of that has this function, and it will return. So in case I am calling this function inside simple, then it will return me this arrow function.
Correct.
Correct. And if I run that function, then this will return. Uh, this will refer to this inside the simple object.
This will refer to simple object. Yes.
So like how is that context getting referred? That is my question.
Okay. So in this specific case, if you want to ask, so the simple clarification would be inside simple is what? It is basically a normal function. Right? Inside simple is a normal function.
Yes, yes, sir.
And inside a normal function, the value of this is going to refer to the object in which it is defined. So the object in which it is defined is what? It is simple.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Right? So now you are defining the arrow function inside a function, inside a normal function. So this arrow function is going to get its context from the parent context, right? And what is the parent context? It is the function.
Parent is a function. Yes, sir. The normal function. You are referring to the normal function.
Yes, it is the normal function of that object called simple. So since the value of this inside the normal function is referring to simple, that's why this inside the arrow function is also going to refer to the simple object, because that's what the parent object tells it.
Okay.
Okay. So if you use an arrow function inside a normal function of an object, so the arrow function also is going to refer to the same object, because what you are doing is you are defining the parent context to be that object itself, because that is the normal function. And inside a normal function, the context is basically the object itself.
So it will always go to the parent.
Is someone speaking something? Not sure. Yeah, Abhishek, is that clear? I was not able to hear if you said anything. Okay, all right. So if this question is clear, shall we move forward with the next question? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, sir. He probably is
Alright.
not able to answer.
So shall we move
Yes,
to the
sir,
next
please.
question? I hope this is clear. So this is something really important for you to understand. So in JavaScript, if we talk about the hosting part, I'm talking from the interview perspective as well. So of course, you will be evaluated on your concepts that are related to hosting, the difference between where and let. This is what we just discussed. And of course, the difference between how a JavaScript program works in a REPL environment and in a script environment. After that, we come to promises. Okay, we come to then and cat chains. And so these things are really important for you to understand. Okay, so in this question specifically, does not matter which option you select, be it first or second, both of these options will give you the full marks. Okay. If in exam any such question arises, you have to assume that you are trying to execute that program in a REPL environment. If there is nothing mentioned in the question and both of the options are present in the question 2, you have to assume that the program is being executed in the REPL environment. But in all probabilities, you won't get any such question where there will be such ambiguity. Either the question statement itself will clearly mention the program is being executed in which environment, or the relevant options won't be there to confuse you. But in any rare case, if this happens, you have to assume that the program is being executed in a REPL environment. Again, I'm talking about from an interview perspective as well. If they ask you what will be the output and they don't mention, you have to tell them the output of the REPL environment. Okay. Or you can, of course, mention that if you execute it in this environment, this will be the output.
One small question regarding this,
yes.
Code snippet only. So the last line of console.log x, right? And if you replace this with this
Yes.
dot x, then I believe it should print 20 as that is the new, property of this object, whatever object that
So
this
which environment you are talking about? Script environment. Right?
only. Yes, sir.
It will be 20. Yes.
20. Yeah. Okay. That is sure. But before the execution of this object obj.func, I think it will be undefined, right?
It will be undefined. Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let's quickly move to the next question. So this is a simple theory-based question. So I hope this won't take much time. So which of the following statements is true regarding JavaScript language? I hope the font size is not that too much small that it is making difficult for you to read.
So we can read it, yeah.
So the first option is JavaScript cannot be executed outside a browser. We have to select the two statements. So this is a false statement.
Yes.
Because we have been executing it inside Node.js project created in REPL. So of course that is outside a browser. So that option is false. It is mandatory to put a semicolon at the end of each statement in JavaScript language. Well, I try to do it as much as possible, but in case even I forget or you forget, it won't cause an error. JavaScript generally puts a semicolon at the end of the statement for you, but this can be difficult at some times. Well, we discuss about those cases sometime later on. But yeah, for now you can understand that yes, JavaScript is going to put semicolon at the end of each statement. So if you are trying to write a structured code, well-organized code, there won't be any problem. But if you are writing, unorganized code, then it might be a problem. So second option is also false because it is not mandatory. Both Google Chrome and Node.js use V8 as the JavaScript engine. That's correct. JavaScript can be executed without a document context. What do you think about the fourth option? What is this document context?
So this is what happens when you do it in a script, right? No?
No.
So it's always in a document context?
Document context is referring to when the environment is browser. So again, this question is implicitly asking you that whether the JavaScript can be executed outside a browser or not.
True, sir.
Sorry?
So that is correct, no? Can be executed without a document context.
Yeah. So document context means, okay, so like you use document dot, you have some DOM methods available for you, get element by ID, get element by class names. So these methods are available to you, but you cannot use these methods outside a browser. If you will try to use the same methods in a Node environment, then of course these methods won't be recognized. So yeah, both Google Chrome and Node.js, they use V8 as the JavaScript engine. Similarly, every browser have their own engines defined. So for example, I guess Firefox, it uses SpiderMonkey. I'm using Edge. Currently, I'm using Chrome, so it of course uses V8. But previously, I used to use that Edge browser. So in that case, it uses Chakra. And yeah, so maybe all of these browsers have their own JavaScript engines. Okay, so this was a simple question. Next question. Which of the following statements is true regarding JavaScript language? So since we have already discussed a lot about the differences between how a JavaScript program works in a script environment and in a REPL environment, this question won't cause much trouble to you. So the first option says, all the variables declared using the where keyword are automatically added as properties of the global object. What do you think?
Not true, sir, because if it is within function, it will be in the function scope only.
Correct, exactly. So this is not true. We have to select the true statements only. The variables declared using the let keyword are never added as the properties of global object.
This seems true from my understanding.
Exactly, this is true because we saw that does not matter whether you execute your program in a script environment or in a REPL environment, it won't be added to the global object property. The variables declared using the where keyword can be redeclared in the same scope without causing any error. So what this question or this option is basically saying is that if you create a variable using var keyword, let's say you create var x equals to something, and after that in the next line itself, you again create var x equals to something, or let's say the same value or either a different value. Will this cause an error?
No.
I don't think so. It will work.
Yes. So this is true. But if you do the same thing with const, okay, or let me just try to relate it with the third option itself. If you try to do the same thing with let, what do you think? What will happen?
No error, sir.
Are you sure?
Let will give an error.
Yes.
It has to be initialized, otherwise there's no const.
No, I'm not talking about const right now. I'm talking about let. So let's say what I do is I create a variable x and I assign it with value 10. Now what I do is I again define x and this time I assign it the value 20. So there won't be any error. But what if I create a variable say y equals to 10 and after that I again create it. Okay, right now here it is not giving us the error. Okay, since we are executing it in a browser environment, let me just open a REPL environment. Just a minute. Or maybe I can just open any online JavaScript compiler. So I hope you are able to see my screen. This programmist.com.
Yes.
So let's say if I define a variable, say with name a, let's say equals to 20, and again I define it to be, let's say 30. So what I'm doing is I am redefining a variable which I have already created before. So what will happen is it is going to give me an error. So it says that identifier a has already been declared, right? But if I try to change this let with where, then it won't happen, right? So that statement is only true for where. Okay, the variables declared using where keyword can be redeclared in the same scope without causing any error. So this is true, but if I would replace this where with let here, then this won't become true. This will be a false statement. And the next thing is, the next option is the variables declared using the keyword const need not be initialized at the time of declaration. What do you think?
It has to be there.
False.
Otherwise, there's no const. No const means it has to be initialized.
Correct. So any variable that you are creating using const, be it an object or anything, it must be initialized at the time of declaration. If you don't, then it will be a syntax error. I remember that there was one such question in the discourse as well. So I just wanted to clear it that this is not something specific to JavaScript. This is something which is followed across the programming languages. Okay? It does not matter whether you use C++ or Java. You have to initialize a const variable at the time of declaration. Well, in Java, you don't have const, you have final. So final variables, you will have to. Okay, so is this question clear? Shall we move to the next question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it is a JavaScript or view-based question. What will happen is if you try to open the index.html, what will be rendered by the browser? So see, what the HTML part says is we have two divs defined here. The ID of first is app1, and the child element of that first div element is another div element whose ID is app2. And inside that element, we are writing a message. The first message is this message1, and then outside its scope, we are writing the second message is message2. Now, what happens if we come to app.js here? Okay, what we do is we define an object, say a, And then what we do is we say new view. Okay, we are creating a view object, and we bind this object to an element who is having ID app1. This hash is telling us that it is an ID. So app1 is this. Okay, this is the main container element, where the entire HTML is present. There is nothing outside this div element. That is just script app, so that does not matter much. So what it does is it says that I am defining only one property, that is message one. So of course, as soon as this object is created in the memory, what will happen is this message one will be replaced with the message Abhishek or with the string Abhishek. But can anyone tell me what will happen with the message 2? Because message 2 is not defined in this object A. And then the next time we are creating a B object, and here we are again binding it. Okay, we are this time binding it with app2. So app2 is here, and here we are defining message 2. Okay, so well, this won't be true in either case, because if we are talking about app2, then this message 2 is outside the scope of this app2. So of course, this message 2 is not going to affect this message 2 placeholder at all. So in that case, the output value is going to be, the first message is Abhishek, the second message is what?
It is very confusing, sir. Actually, so I got it completely wrong. So I got it the other way around. I'm still not able to figure out.
Okay, so here you won't get any value. This will be left empty. And instead, you will get a warning in your console that message 2 is not declared in your view instance, but it is used in the DOM, something like that.
No, but see,
yes.
By the time, see, it is how does the binding happen? Because both of them are getting bound. So I thought both will get initialized.
Exactly. Sorry. Which you're talking about objects or these placeholders?
When I see this message one, how does the processing begin? Does it start looking at the binding?
Yes, correct. Okay, let me just discuss it in a bit details, because that is something that you should know. How the JavaScript program is working, that is the first thing that should come to your mind. Okay, remember that JavaScript is what? It is a single-threaded synchronous programming language. That means all of its execution happens in a sequence. There is no way that this B object can be executed or can be created before A does, right? Because since A is written before B, so A will be created first, right? Not B. Now, when A object is created, what it does is it binds this object A with app1. So app1 is something that is a parent container element of this HTML, and this object is just defining the value of message1 variable. And we are using this message1 variable, so that is okay, Abhishek. But what happens if we are using message2 here, or let's say we are using 10 other properties which are not defined here? So what will it do is, since this object is created and it has already been binded with app1 element, it is going to hydrate all of such placeholders or all of such Mustack expressions that come under the scope of this app1 div element. So since this is a container element of our entire HTML file, does not matter that how many placeholders we have here. If we have 20, if we have 50, does not matter. It is going to hydrate all of them. But what will happen in case it is not defining any value? Then what will it do is, it will simply leave them empty. This message 2 will be left as empty. And instead, it will generate a warning, or it will raise a warning in the console. Remember, it won't be an error. It will be a warning that you are using a placeholder or some Mustack expression or some variable message 2 in the HTML or in the DOM, which you have not created in your view instance. But okay, you are referencing it.
Yeah. So sorry, one question. I think this is maybe my confusion.
Yes.
So first we are executing the HTML. So are you saying the script will be processed before the div directive is processed?
The script will be processed before div? No. The script will be processed once this HTML is processed, because we have written this script tab after.
Okay.
So this app.js will only be executed when the HTML will encounter this.
Yeah. So then when I'm looking at message 1, nothing is defined, right? Because the app.js has not been processed.
Correct. Okay.
So both should be. So that's why I got confused. I mean, the more I thought about it, the more I got confused.
You just think it about this way. Remove this script statement and try to execute this HTML itself. Okay. What will happen is you will get the exact same output on the screen. Right? Do you think that the HTML itself will hydrate these variables for you? No, it is not going to. they will be shown as it is on the display screen if we are not embedding this JavaScript file here.
Correct, sir. So it will be like first message and then within square bracket, within set bracket message one, the entire
Correct.
thing will come. Yeah.
Yes. And when it sees that, okay, there is some JavaScript that has been embedded in this HTML file, so now it will start executing or processing what has to be done with those placeholders, because these placeholders have nothing to do with the HTML. These are there because of view.
Okay.
So when the view file starts processing, when this object is created, it will see, okay, basically an element having ID app1 is to be binded with the object that was just created. So app1 is this object. This has to be binded with an object created with name A and whatever properties it defines. So it sees, okay, it defines message1. So what it does is, wherever message1 is used in the scope of this app1 element, it simply replaces that message1 value or this entire curly braces message1 with the value whatever is defined. And after that, once this is done, whatever message or whatever placeholders are remaining in the scope of this app1 element, since those are not defined anywhere in the data instance of this view, or let's say even in the computed property of this view object, they are going to be left empty. They will be hydrated. Remember, they will be hydrated. That means they will be replaced. View is going to process them. Just that they won't get any value.
Okay, I get that. But we still haven't processed the B, because that's also there in app.js.
Okay, when this complete A object is processed and you start processing B, you see that there is one app2. Okay, you come to this app2 element. But do you think that there is anything remaining for this object to do here? Because all of the placeholders have already been hydrated. There is nothing, there is no mistake expression that view should process now. There is nothing remaining.
Oh, okay. That is the funda. Okay, so because the message2 is not left as such, it has already been set to an empty value.
Yes. Even if this message2 would come into the scope of app2, then also this message2 will be empty. Right now, it is even outside the scope of app2. So this is a little bit simple question. If I try to compare it with the question when I put it inside the scope of this app2. Right now, it is outside the scope. That means message2 has nothing to do with the B object because it is binded with app2. So it is not going to look at outside of its scope. But even if I put this P element inside this app2, let's say just after this P element, then also message2 will be hydrated by the first view object itself. The second view object will have nothing to do.
Sir, what if we swap the values of EL?
Okay, so sorry, sir, just a minute. So then just to confirm, sorry, I'll come to your question, which means the second view object is as good as not being there.
Exactly.
Practically.
Yes.
In this way, okay, because the first view
if the object that you are creating after the first object, if that is binded with a child element of the first element, then of course it is of no use. But let's say if you are creating it something or binding it to some element that is a parent element of this app1 also, then of course it may make sense because there might be some placeholders that are written after the scope of this or outside the scope of this app1 element. In that case, it may make sense. But right now, yes, of course, as you said, there is of no use.
Sir, what if we swap the values of EL variable in both the objects?
Okay, so
like
if you just put app2 here and app1 here, is it?
Yes, sir. Then it will give.
In that case, okay, when app2 will come, okay, so app2 is coming here and it is saying message1. So, all right, message1 will remain the same, that is Abhishek. But if you will come here as app1, so app1 is defining the value of message2. So in that case, yes, it is going to say message1 is Abhishek and message2 is Rajput.
Yeah, that is the answer I also chose, but I know this is wrong. Okay.
All right, so is this question clear now?
Yes, sir.
Shall we move to the next question? Okay, the answer for that question is okay, empty.
Nothing and Rajput. Yeah, last option.
No. It's the third option. The A object is binded with the parentmost element. So message2 will be hydrated in the first place, but it will be left empty because message2 is not defined in A instance. Are you still having any confusion?
Hello,
No,
sir.
fine. Yeah, it takes. I got it. I will again review this. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, Kapil.
This is quite a tricky question. That's what I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in JavaScript, this app.js, whichever app we define first,
Hmm.
that will hydrate all the elements, right? Irrespective of whether
In
there
its
is
scope.
app 2, app 3.
Yes, in its scope.
So if app 2 was the sibling of app 1, means it was outside, then both would have worked.
Yes, of course. Then they will be independent then. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the next question, seventh question. What we have to do is consider the below JavaScript code and predict the output. Okay, we just have to predict the output of this question. Again, we are doing something with this here. So let's see. We have created two objects, x1 and x2. We'll see. We'll go through these objects definition later on. So x1.add. So it must be a function, I guess. x1.add is a function. So what you are doing is you are assigning this reference to y. So y gets this add function, that is return this dot b plus space plus x. Now what you do with this y is you use call method with it. Call method is used to assign a different object reference or a different value of this reference. So the value of this or the new value of this is now x2. That means is this x2 now. So this is going to refer to what? This x2. It is not going to refer to x1 anymore. So what you do is you provide x2 as the value, and since this function is taking an argument, you provide the value to be Diya. Okay. So this dot b is what? So x2 dot b is what? It is welcome. Welcome plus x. X is Divya. Sorry, it's not Divya, it's Diya. So welcome space Diya is going to be the answer. Any doubts in this question?
What if there is instead of using b both sides, I have used a different thing that will still work, right? So in, for example, x1, that instead of b it could be a. That will still work.
Instead of, sorry, can you repeat?
The second line in the code, the variable could be a, right?
Which line you are talking about?
In the output, the second line, the x1 definition.
Okay, x1 definition. Yes.
Yeah. The first, you say you're assigning hello to b, right? Instead of that, I can even say a.
Okay, so that means what you're saying is you are just assigning a property, is it?
No, sir. So on the left side, there is b, right? Suppose I call it a, this function would still work.
Okay, if you just replace this b with a, is it what you are saying? Not exactly getting it. Can you just write it once?
See, suppose, here there is b on both x1 and x2 have b.
Okay.
But what I was saying is that even x1 has only a, not b, and I do this call.
Okay, if it just has a, it, let's say,
or it has nothing, right? Even if it has nothing, right? That the entire statement is not there. This code will still work.
This will still work, yes.
Because we are binding x2. X2 has b definition, so this dot b is actually.
So this a and b does not matter here. Correct.
Excuse me, sir. I have something to ask.
This is not like in Java, this will give an error. Suppose it is not there, it will say it is not defined, so it won't even compile. But in JavaScript, there's no such issue. Okay.
Yeah, because it will consider by default the value to be undefined in that case. Yeah, someone was asking something.
Yes, sir. I have a question. So in x2, so x2 we are providing as this argument for this add function for on x1, right?
Okay.
So in this x2, there is no a defined, right, sir? But add we are not using from there. Add we are using from x1 only, right?
Yes.
All right. So then b is there, and then we'll pass the argument, and it will be concatenated. Okay, sure, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
So here, what is getting add is called as actually x2.add, not x1.add.
Call is x2.add. Yes, exactly. Well, not exactly, because you are still calling the add of x1. Just that you are changing the value of this to x2. Well, the definition here looks quite similar, but in case the definitions would have been different, then of course that would become wrong.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Which means suppose the x2 the order could be reversed, return x plus this dot a. So, but what I'm calling is actually the x1's add function
Exactly. Yes.
with x2 x2 as the object. Okay.
Correct. Yes. So you are calling this definition only, this one that is defined inside this object x1, just that you are changing the value of this. So you are making this referring to x2 here. That's it. Otherwise, this definition is being executed, not this one. Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so consider the below code snippet and predict the output. Yeah, it is a simple question. So what we do is we just create an object here. A is an array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. B is a function. What it does is it just expands this, what do I say, array A using this spreading operator. So it is just like extend, okay, extend in Python list. So what it does is it just returns a list having 9 elements starting from 1 ending till 9. Okay, so what it does is x.b, it provides it to C, and then C.call x. So this is basically going to refer to x only. Well, ultimately it is going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. Sorry. So it is going to give us 8 elements, not 9. Yeah. Okay. I hope this is simple enough. We are using call method, but ultimately we are assigning it the same object in which it is defined. It is object x itself. So this is basically similar to calling it as x.b. This is also same. Okay, I guess this is simple enough. We can move to the next question. So consider the below code snippet and predict the output. So what we do is we created a courses list having 2 objects. Then we have a function called get course. Then we have a function called add course. Okay, both of these are using set timeout. The timeout for first
Yes,
is what?
If
Yes.
you can briefly explain set timeout. I think this is a very tricky question on timeout because the first one does not have
set
any
timeout function,
value.
It basically accepts 2 arguments. Set timeout function accepts 2 arguments. One is a callback function. That means a function that is to be called when a certain condition is met. And what is that condition? The condition is defined as the second parameter. Well, I would not say it a condition, but you define a time interval or you define the number of milliseconds JavaScript engine has to wait for executing that callback function that you passed. But remember, the time that you are providing in milliseconds here is the minimum time that the JavaScript engine will wait. Because once a function is being put into the call queue, it will only be put into the call stack when it is empty. That means if there are some other functions which are still being executed and are present in the call stack, then JavaScript engine may be required to more than that number of milliseconds that you define. Okay, or let me try to show you a simple example. Let me come here.
The add course will just put it in the queue and return, and set course will be executed immediately.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Add course, the first 2 are definitions only, right? The last 2 lines are the actual call.
Correct. Get course and add course.
Add course will just put that in the queue because there is a timer.
Yeah.
And return immediately. And get course will get called immediately.
Get course will also get.
Because get course does not have a timer. I mean, there's no timer.
So if this does not have a timer, that means it can be considered as 0 milliseconds. So what will happen is, as soon as the first statement is executed here, that is add course. Okay. So what add course does is it basically passes this object as an argument to this add course function too. But ultimately, what is happening in this function is you are calling a set timeout, and you are saying that the callback function is supposed to be this courses.push and course that you are getting as an argument, but you put a timer of 2000 milliseconds. That means you put a timer of 2 seconds. So what will it do is it will just put this component in a separate place that is known as web API and will say that I will be waiting for 2 seconds there or 2000 milliseconds there. But this will be done so fast. Okay, this will be done very fast by JavaScript. As soon as this has been put into a separate component known as web API, the JavaScript engine will execute the next statement immediately, that is get course. Get course also does the same thing. It says that I am having a set timeout, And whatever definition is written here, this is basically a definition of a callback function. Remember, we are using an arrow function notation here. So this is a callback function. But since we are not providing any timer here, it will implicitly be considered to be 0. It will also be put into that web API component. But here the timer is 0. So as soon as it is put into the web API component, it will immediately be put into the callback queue because the timer will be over. But remember, by the time it is put into the callback queue, the add course will still be executing, or it will still be waiting for its timer to get over, that is of 2000 milliseconds. And since it has 0 milliseconds, so basically it will be put into the queue first, get course. And since it has been put into the queue first, there is no way that add course can be executed, or this courses.push can be executed before this get course or this set timeout definition executes. Because get course has already come into the callback queue. And remember, queue works on FIFO principle, right? First in, first out. That means whatever the element or whatever function that comes first to the queue will be executed first. Does not matter how much it has to wait for its turn, but it will be the first one that will be executed. Okay, so this is the fundamental concept here. Get course will be put into the callback queue before add courses. Okay. And since it is present in the callback queue, does not matter how much time it has to wait. Well, in this case, it is not going to wait any more time because it has nothing to do. JavaScript engine has nothing to do after this function call. So what it will do is it will automatically pick it up from the callback queue and it is going to put it into the call stack. What it will do is then this definition will start its execution. So it will create an array that is all courses. And then what it does is it basically iterates over this courses array. So remember, this courses array just have 2 objects right now. This new object has not yet been added because we are executing this get course function definition before add course. So what it does is it iterates over that array. Course is going to represent the object, index is going to represent the index, that is 0, 1, 2. Now what it does is it creates one array or a list. Well, in JavaScript we will call it an array. All courses.push course, that means it is going to push all of the objects that it is iterating over one by one into this all courses array. After iterating or after finishing the iterations, what it will do is it will simply log the value of all courses. Remember, this was not executed when this console.log was executed. Okay, this is still waiting to be executed. So that means this new object has not been added yet. If this has not been added, courses list only had 2 objects available, that is name mad1 and name mad2. So this is what the output will be. You will be printing an array with 2 elements in it. Name mad1 description is this, name mad2 description is this.
Sir, one question.
Yes.
So what if the initial get course also has a timer of 2000? All 3 will get printed, right?
Okay, so if get course also has a timer of 2000 milliseconds, so since add course is the first function that is getting executed, so ultimately this is the first one that will be pushed to the callback queue, then yes, you will get all of the 3 elements.
Maybe 1950 might be a race condition, but 2000 definitely all 3 will get printed.
Yes. Okay, so the output for this question would be 2 objects only, that too in the form of an array. So first option is correct.
So, sir, my understanding then becomes that when I run this function set timeout, it delays in the activity of adding it to the queue, right?
Yes, correct.
And by the time I define that many seconds or that much millisecond will be delayed before this activity is added to the queue.
Correct.
And since other activities, other functions are before it, the functions which are before it goes into the stack one by one, and there is a thing called run to completion. Then so there is nothing called concurrency. The functions
correct,
will be.
Exactly. Remember, JavaScript is a single-threaded language. Yes. Okay, then that raises a good point. That the timer that you are mentioning here, that you are defining here, that is 2000 milliseconds. It is not the time that this function will require to execute. It is the time that this will require to be put into the callback queue. That was a good point raised by Sandeep. Okay. Because it is possible that the JavaScript engine might still be executing some code that is still present in the call stack. And until and unless the call stack does not become empty, nothing from the callback queue will be pushed. The callback or the call stack has to be empty in order to take some functions from the callback queue to be executed. So this timer that's why it's said to be the minimum time that is required to execute this callback function, or you can say that it is the time that is required to put this function into the callback queue. Okay, so that was a good point. Yeah. Okay, so is this clear?
Sir, good question. Yeah. Clarified quite a few set time mode cancels. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next question is, how is the vshow directive different from vif directive? Choose all correct statements. Okay. So the first option does not make any sense, because if there are two different directives, there must be some difference between the two. So the first option automatically eliminates. The second option says, okay, does anyone know what is the difference between the two, vshow and vif?
Yeah. So vshow, it like renders it. It just sets the display to none. And vif, if it is not true, it will not render it in the DOM.
Exactly. So the difference between the two is, as Lakshminandan already said, that vshow basically does not remove or insert the element again and again into the DOM. What it does is it keeps the element in the DOM, but what it does is it just changes the CSS property. It just changes the CSS property display from none to block or none to online or whatever it is. So when you want to, when the value or the expression provided to view show or vshow, it becomes false. What it does is it just changes the display property to none. And when that expression becomes true, it changes the display property back to block or inline, whatever it was before. But in case of vif, what it does is it removes the complete element from the DOM. If the expression provided to this directive becomes false, and when it becomes true, it again inserts that element into DOM. Okay. So what it does is it inserts into DOM. When the expression becomes false, it puts that out. It deletes that element from the DOM. That means DOM has to go through the restructuring again and again. Okay, so first option, of course, is not making any sense. It is definitely a false statement. The second statement says that the vshow directive is rendered in the DOM even if the expression does not evaluate to true. What do you think? Whether this option is correct or not?
There is no not, sir. There is does actually. I think the question should have said does not. That's the tricky part. So obviously, if it is true, it will obviously be rendered.
Correct. Okay, so it should be does not. Yes. Well, anyways, in both of these scenarios, the option will be true. Well, I'll just make it not to make it more. Well, I would say to make more sense. Yeah. The next option says vshow should be preferred when the DOM needs to be frequented. Okay, it should be updated frequently. What do you think? What should be your choice from vshow and vif if you are trying to update an element quite frequently in your DOM?
vshow, sir.
The reason for it?
Sir, just changing the display to true and false, we can like show it or unshow it. But in case of if we have to render it, like we have to reload it in some way. Like I am not exactly finding the word to say, but it will require more computation, I think.
Exactly. So in terms of optimization, it is better if we use vshow if there is an element that needs to be frequently updated in the DOM, because that will just require the DOM to update the CSS property instead of re-rendering the entire DOM once again. But in case you are using vif, then this has to happen, because if you are entering a new node in your DOM structure, then the entire DOM has to be, of course, re-rendered. Okay. So that is why v should be your priority if you have such element in
one
your
question here. So assuming that we are using components, right? So if we use vif, then assuming that the component, the other component that we're using inside of an app has some lifecycle events, like for example, when it is created, maybe it is fetching something from the network or something like that. So what happens is that if we use vif, then I think it will not be rendered into the DOM, and then whatever lifecycle events are there in the component will not be executed, is what I believe. But
yes, of course, they won't be.
Yeah, But if we use vShow, what happens is that it'll kind of make the request even though we are not seeing the component, right? So that is something that we need to take care of.
Well, yeah, that's a good point too. Okay, correct. Yeah, in that case, the lifecycle hooks, yeah, they have to be implemented carefully. All right,
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay. The next directive that we are talking about here is vclock. Has anyone heard about this directive before? Vclock?
No, sir. I was trying to remember. I couldn't find it. My notes.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, sir. I found it in this question. Then I went to the documentation.
Okay. So did you find it in the documentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So would you like to share what you read?
Actually, sir, I didn't understand, but it is like related to some CSS styling. That part I understood, but other than that, I did not understand much.
All right. So for explaining this part, I would like to go back to one of the questions that were related to view. Okay, let's talk about this part itself. Okay. Well, maybe a few of you would have observed that, not all, that I can surely say. So see, what happens is that when this HTML is loaded, and since we are writing the script to be loaded once the HTML has been processed completely, so there would be a short span of time where, or during that time, you would be able to see these Mustache expressions unrendered, or they are not yet rendered on the browser screen, and you are able to see them as it is, as the HTML will show them. That means you are able to see these parentheses or message one and these, sorry, not parentheses, actually curly braces. Two curly braces, message one, and then again two curly braces. This is what you will be able to see for a very short span of time. Right? Maybe for a couple of milliseconds or even less than that.
Yeah, correct, sir. So if you keep doing a debugger, if you keep looking at it, yes, you will see the document HTML being different. Yes.
Exactly. Because what happens is the HTML is getting processed before the script does. And by the time script is processed, well, it happens so fast that many of you would not even have observed it so far. But yeah, I would suggest you to try this experiment and see that what you see on the HTML. So once the view object is processed, it will replace this message one placeholder to whatever value is being defined in the view instance. Right? This is how it happens. But suppose you are creating a large scale application, and you don't want the user experience to be bad. That means you don't want your users to see those expressions that you have used in your UI. So what you would do here is you would make use of vclock directive. Okay. So now let us come back to this question once again. Vclock directive. Okay. So the very first statement here is basically a true statement. I would like to take this as a reference to explain what this vclock does. The vclock directive remains on the element till the associated component instance is ready. Right? Remember this, or try to interpret this statement that vclock directive will remain with the element till the associated component instance is ready, and as soon as it becomes ready, this directive will be removed from that element. Okay. Now let's try to relate it with this example. Previously, you were getting this message one placeholder, or this Mustache expression as it is being displayed on your HTML output, let's say for a couple of milliseconds. Still, it does not improve or it does not make the user experience bad in any sense, but still I don't want it to happen for my users. I don't want to see them any Mustache expressions that I am using in my UI. So what will I do is, let's say I am just using one Mustache expression that I have defined inside the P element. I'm talking about a very small example. Now you can use the text example in the entire HTML file as well, in the context of entire HTML file as well. Right now I'm just talking it in context of a simple P element here, since it is the only element I'm assuming that is using this Mustache expression in view. So what will I do is I will just use vclock directive with this P element. What will I do is I will just use vclock. The way I use vif, the way I use vshow, I will just use vclock. Okay. Now, as the definition says that the vclock directive will stay with the element till the component is ready, or till the element is ready, not the component. Basically, the element, the HTML element is ready because it is binded with HTML elements. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of doing that? Is there any benefit that we are getting, by adding that vcloak directive with this p element? Of course, right now we are not getting any benefit. But now let's talk about if we try to write some additional CSS for this HTML. Okay. So what you can do is you can write a CSS property for the elements, for the p elements who are having vcloak as one of their attributes. So I hope you remember how do we write it in CSS. Let me just share this tab. Let's say you want to write CSS for all of the p elements who are having vcloak as their attribute. So what you would do is you would do something like this, vcloak. Okay. And after that, you will define whatever the properties you want to write. And here you can say, display or something. I can say display none, or I can say visibility none, anything. Visibility. Yeah, you can say this is it. So let's come back here again. What I did was I selected all of the elements who were having vcloak directive embedded with them. And what I did was I also added a property in CSS. What that property will do is that whoever element is having vcloak as their directive, what will I do is I will simply change their visibility to hidden, or I will change their display to none. That means they won't be even shown in the UI for even that short span of time. Okay. Now the question is that what happens when the element is ready, to be shown to the user, and when it is being hydrated, what will happen then? How do you take it back, or how do you bring it back onto the UI screen? Remember, the definition itself says that it will remain with the element, or it will stay with the element only by the time the component instance is not ready. Sorry, I'm again saying component instance. It should be element. Till the element instance is not ready. Now, once it becomes ready, what it does is it is automatically removed from those elements. Now, when it is removed from the elements, so the CSS that you wrote there, was only for the elements, or was only for the p elements who were having this vcloak as their attribute. Now, since vcloak attribute has been removed from this p element, so this CSS won't apply anymore to that element, right? Now, if this won't apply, that means these elements you will be able to bring them on the UI. So what is the advantage that you are getting here is that even for that short span of time, you are not allowing the user to see these Mustache expressions that you are using in the UI, because you are making them hidden, or you are changing their display property to none even for those couple of seconds for which it is being shown on the UI. So this is what the advantage of using vcloak directive is. It remains with the element till the element is not ready, or till the element is ready. As soon as it becomes ready, it is automatically removed. Okay. So is the objective understood?
Yes, sir. And just a different question: can programmers also be used instead of Replit? I saw that you are using that.
Sorry?
You use this online site called Programmers, right? Can that also be used instead of Replit? It seems to be useful.
Yeah, sure. You can use that too. But in case you want to write multiple JavaScript files, then Replit will of course be preferred, because there you are just writing a program.
So until it gets to that script app.js statement, vcloak is actually just a regular CSS class or attribute.
Yeah, it's an attribute.
Yeah, what Vue is doing is just removing that vcloak.
Correct.
Things. Okay.
Both A and B are true, no?
So vcloak directive remains on the element till the associative component is ready. Okay. It can be combined with CSS to help hide. Yeah, this is ultimately the purpose of it. So both A and B are true. So this is the entire purpose of using vcloak.
The mustache binding is what is referred to as, what is that, curly braces, right? That is mustache, no?
Yes, correct. Mustache expression is, yes, correct. Whatever is written inside those curly braces. Okay, so is the objective of this vcloak directive clear? Using it?
Yes.
Okay. Now the next question is, which of the following could be considered as and ephemeral state. So remember, we have three types of states when we talk about web applications. We have system state, we have application state, and then we have ephemeral state. So system state can be considered as the superset of all, which is having all kinds of information that will be required to reconstruct the current state of the system. Application state is something that is very specific to a user. That means if I am having some information that is going to be different from other users, so that is what you call as application state. And ephemeral state is something that is visible on your screen for a very short duration of time, and that is expected to be lost in after some time, after very limited time. So if you talk about user database of NPTEL, that is something that you do not want to lose, of course. So that is considered as the system state, because whatever information that you show on the NPTEL website or even on the NPTEL learners dashboard, that all is coming from this the database that this NPTEL is having. So this is an example of system state.
Sir,
List of emails select. Sorry, someone is saying something.
Sir, just a small thing. Application state can remain there even if we refresh the page.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
List of emails selected, we'll come on to this option later. Google search index. Do you think that if you refresh your Google or if you come back after some time, the Google search index will change? No, it won't. User shopping cart content on Amazon.in. So again, if you come back after some time and you refresh your page, does not matter how many times, do you think that your shopping cart of your Amazon.in account will change if you are not, of course, changing it manually?
No.
No, sir.
It won't change. So the only thing that is remaining here is the second option, that is list of emails selected for archiving in Gmail. Let's say you select a few of those emails that are visible in the view currently, and then you refresh the page. So whatever emails that you selected before, they won't be shown anymore. It means the emails will be shown, but it won't show you which all emails were selected before you refreshed. So this is an example of ephemeral state. In the last session when we were discussing all of these, I guess a few people asked about what can be the examples of ephemeral state on discourse. So I guess one of you mentioned that if a discourse topic is having more than 30 posts and you scroll down, let's say to the 31st post and you refresh your screen, what happens is you again go back to your first post in that topic. So that navigation till 30th post was an ephemeral state, was an example of ephemeral state. The moment you refresh, it is going to change or it is going to be lost.
Sir, option D is application state, right?
User shopping cart. Yes, it is application state. Okay, so yeah, here is that question. When you click the reply button in Discourse and type part of an answer and then reload the page, assuming that the content you typed will be lost. So you have to assume that the content that you typed will be lost. What type of state information does this partially typed answer correspond to? What do you think?
Ephemeral state.
It will be an ephemeral state. The previous question was explicitly telling you select an example of ephemeral state, and it is basically asking you, it is giving you a scenario and is asking you what type of state will it be. So it will be ephemeral because the moment you refresh, it will all be lost. The question itself is saying that it will be lost. But in case of discourse, when you do so, it does not happen. So that's why the question says assuming that it happens. So yeah, it is an example of ephemeral state. Okay, so any changes to application level state such that, such as user preferences will always require updates in the server. Is the statement true or false? Any changes to application level state such as user preferences will always require updates in the server. Okay, so what do you think? What should be the answer for this question? Will it be true or false?
False.
Okay, why false?
Because the application this level state can be stored partially on browser as well. So
exactly, you can store it in form of cookies, maybe in form of some storage APIs, say local storage or whatever is available. So yeah,
but then if I refresh the browser, will it stay or will it get lost?
Yes, of course, it will stay. If you are storing it in local storage, it won't get lost until and unless the user manually deletes it.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Cache won't do this job?
Sorry?
Won't cache be used to store user data?
You cannot trust on cache because you don't know when it will expire.
Okay.
This is a very advanced application, right? Which stores this kind of state on the application.
I did not get it.
Something, suppose I have selected some items in a shopping cart, and if it is not in system but only in the application state, it is a reasonably advanced application.
Correct, yes.
A lot of work is happening in the browser itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So shopping cart is system state, right?
Shopping cart is an example of application state. No.
But
It's not a system state.
like for example, when I'm on Amazon, if I add something to the cart, like it's updated in the mobile also, it's wherever I go.
Yeah, so application state is specific to user. That means does not matter where you access that account of that particular user, it will be available to all of those.
Okay.
System state is something that you will be requiring to, say, reconstruct the system once again.
Okay.
Okay. Will you be able to provide the users with their initial items that they had?
Okay.
So that is the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess here the actual list of items, the price, everything will be system state.
Exactly. The list of products with all of their information, and of course the users' information and all. All of these will form system state for Amazon.com or .in. Okay. So yeah. Question number 15. So consider the following markup and JavaScript. Again, I guess I will have to reduce my screen size a bit, but I guess it should be okay. Okay, this is a fairly long program. For this app, the browser will render text apple some number, pineapple some number, and a button with text distribute fruit. If a user clicks on the button distribute fruit 3 times, then what will be the value of sum number 1 and sum number 2 respectively? Okay, let us see the HTML first. So we are having a component called apple. We are having the component pineapple. We are having a button here, distribute fruit. So what apple component does is it takes one prop apple count that we are passing here, apple count. So this must be a computed property or some variable. Apple count is here. Okay. Similarly, we have one pineapple count. Okay, that is being used with this. So we have button here, and then what we are doing is we are just taking this prop and we are showing it here. Okay. So what the question says is that we have to click on distribute fruit 3 times. Forget about what these components are showing right now. Initially, you can assume that these components are showing. So whatever the initial value of this apple count will return. So this dot total fruits is what? It is 10. So 10 by 2 is what? 10 by 2 will be 5. So math.floor is going to return you the floor value. So of course it will return you 5. So the apple count that will be shown initially would be 5. And for pineapple, it would be something, but we need not compute that thing, because we are the question is asking us to find out what the number will be shown after clicking that button 3 times. So when you are clicking this button 3 times, that is this distribute fruits. So what it is doing is it is just making an increment in the total fruits. That is a variable, instance variable defined in the view instance that you have created here app. So it is initialized with value 10. On clicking this button once, you are incrementing it by 11. So after you click this button for the first time, the value of total fruits will become 10 plus 11. So it will become 21. Is it okay?
Yes.
The next time you click on this button, what the new value would be? 21 plus 11?
32.
Okay. Next time you click on it?
43.
It becomes 43. So you basically have to find out the return value of these components or of these computed properties when the total fruits value is 43. 43, right? 33 plus 10, 43. Yes. Okay. So let's first find out the value for apple count. So 43 divided by 2, what it would be? It would be 21.5. So the floor value of that would be 21. So for apple, it would be 21. So for apple, it would be 21. Well, this is the only answer. Well, let's try to find out for pineapple count too. So we check here, this dot total fruits, that is 43, modulo division 2 equals to 0. So do you think that if you divide 43 by 2, the remainder will come to be 0?
No, false.
It won't.
So
in that case, the second expression would be evaluated here, not the first one. This will be evaluated if this condition had been true. But now we will work on the second condition or the second expression instead. So this dot total fruits by 2. So again, 43 divided by 2, it becomes 21.5. 21.5, the floor value of that would be 21. And then you add 1 to that value, that is 21 plus 1, that becomes 22. So the value that will be shown here would be 22. So the answer is 21 and 22.
Yeah, but this question is the moment you gave the click. If you figure out what does click do, your answer is there.
If you figure out,
Once you know what click does, you know the total has to be 43.
yes, of course. Yes, so of course you don't need to find out the value of this computed property again and again. So
Yeah,
someone
so
who knows how this is
for
working, that will directly count, okay, but the value is to be incremented, and then finally find the computed property answer at once, instead of finding it again and again for each click.
yeah, so for these long code type questions, we can assume that the code is correct.
Yes, you
Just
can assume
yes,
that the code is correct.
yeah.
Sir, here the question mark and the colon is something new. So that is just the if and else condition type.
Yeah, that is a ternary operator. I'm not sure if you have heard about it before. That is a ternary operator. What it does is, the first thing you write is basically an expression. That expression either evaluates to true or evaluates to false. If that is evaluated to true, then what you write after question mark will be evaluated. And if that expression evaluates to false, then what you write after colon will be evaluated.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a ternary operator. Okay, the next question is, which of the following statements is a false regarding JavaScript language? So JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, unlike C++ or Java.
True. True.
This is true.
Okay, what are dynamically typed languages, and how do you compare them with statically typed?
So once you declare a variable, it
So type declaration must be made in initialization or before initialization.
So if you have worked with languages like C++ or Java, well, I assume that you all must have, in case you are doing MAT too. So maybe you would have done Java before, or maybe doing it right now, or probably will do it after that. So what happens in languages like Java is, I'm not talking about C++, since I can assume that most of you may not have done C++, as it has not been a part of this program too. So in Java, what you do is you have to explicitly define the data type of a variable while creating it. You either have to define it, with int, with string, or whatever it is. In case you are working with primitive types, and in case you want to create an object, you also have to define what the type of that object would be. Okay, but what happens in dynamically typed language? So examples of dynamically typed language are what you have studied in this program throughout: Python and JavaScript that we are studying now. In Python, when you create a variable, do you define types like the variable should be of integer type, the variable should be of string type, or something? You just write the name and you assign the value. Later, you can even change the type of the value. Let's say you are creating a variable with name A and you assign a value 9. Later, you can change it to something else. Let's say Abhi. At any point of program, you can do that. But in case of statically typed language, once a variable is defined to be int, it cannot hold any other value other than integer type. It has to hold only integer type of value. So this is basically a kind of flexibility that dynamic type languages get, like Python and JavaScript. These languages are getting. Okay, so you don't need to worry about the type of the variable, and you can change the type of the variable at any point of time you want. So this statement is basically true. So we have to select only the false statements for this question. A JavaScript program execution always starts from main function.
False.
It is false. So it is true in the context of this question. Again, I would like to bring in the example of C++ or Java. There, of course, you will have to define the main function, and that is where the execution starts from. A JavaScript program must have a function with name main defined. This is again false because there is no role of main in JavaScript language. So this option is false, but it becomes true in the context of this question. JavaScript is also an object-oriented programming language. Of course, we can create. We can create objects in JavaScript languages too. I hope you all would have worked with classes and objects. So of course, it is an object-oriented programming language, and that's why this option is true, and it becomes false in the context of this question. So any doubts in this question? Any doubts in this question? The last question, 16th?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so let us just check if we had selected all of the answers before. we made one wrong answer somewhere.
Sir, in the 15th, I have a small doubt, sir.
Yes, I'll come to that. Okay, there I did not select any answer. Okay, all right, no issues. 15th. Yes, please.
Sir, what is the purpose of this prop, sir? I have read it, but somehow I'm not getting
Okay.
it.
So, okay. The use cases of props are if you want to transmit some information from a parent component to a child component, then you pass it through props. So here, this apple count value was available in the main view instance. It was not available in the apple component here. But what if apple component wants to access this value? What you can do is you can pass it as a prop to this component. And once it gets this value as a prop, it can just use it just like any variable defined. So if you want to transmit some information from a parent component to a child component, that is where you use props.
Okay, sir.
Pretty much when you do most component work, you need props, right? Otherwise, it is very difficult to do any proper component.
Exactly. Okay, all right. So we just forgot to select the answer for this question. So what it would be is this dot x1. So you are providing b, then it will be 20. Okay. All right. So we have completed the mock, and I hope this mock covered all of the concepts that were taught in the weeks 1 to 4. But still, please let me know in case you are having any issues with any of the concepts being taught from weeks 1 to 4 or any other. Okay, what is this AppDev 3? Okay, I'm just reading this comment. It was made on 10/34.
Yeah, so one question had that Math 3.
Okay, all right.
So how many directives do we need to know?
Well, that's not an easy question for me to answer, that how many directives you need to know. Generally, you should be just knowing the basic directives that Vue uses, like if, vshow, vmodel, vcloak. These are the things that, of course, maybe you can, expect a couple of such questions, not more than 2 questions in the quiz exam. But yes, there may be 1 or 2 questions that can surprise you during the quiz exams. Just 1 or 2, not more than that. Otherwise, if you just know the basics of what has been taught during the live lectures or live sessions or even in the lectures or screencast, that is more than sufficient for you.
And sir, like AppDev 1, the screencasts are very important, and you would expect questions from the screencast coverage also, right?
Well, we try to basically make a balance between the programming and the theory part in any question paper. And that's what we have tried doing in the quiz 1 exam too. So of course, many questions are going to come from the programming aspect, and they will directly be related to the screencast. And of course, the live lectures too, means the live sessions that we instructors take, because we generally discuss a few of those concepts that were just touched upon in the lectures or in the screencast, and we discuss those in details here. For example, if we talk about hosting, or maybe the difference between let and const and wire, maybe details about promises, those chains, etc., set timeout, set interval, these things. Yeah, so for quiz exam, if you have covered the lecture contents, and then I guess it should be sufficient for you to attempt the quiz exam. As I have mentioned, that there may be 1 or 2 questions that you might not have seen before, but we try to keep those questions as minimal as we can.
Sir, I have a doubt in one of the.
Abhishek, did you mention the question number 2?
No, sir. It's practice assignment 2, question number 8. Just small doubt, sir.
Practice assignment 2 and question number 8. Yes.
This one, so here what it is, like we are declaring, we are creating an object of the batsman, and then we are just calling the describe method.
Yes.
So my question is, like how is it if you go to, yeah, little bit, here you can see in the describe part,
Hmm.
here it is using this dot name, this dot team, which is inside that class,
Okay.
but this dot role is not inside that class, rather it is inside its child class.
All right.
So in Java, what we have learned is child class can access anything of its parents class.
Okay.
But here, what is happening here? Parent class is accessing child class, accessing an attribute of child class. We can say.
Okay. Yeah. So let me tell you how the flow is
So
basically.
can I try to answer this, sir?
Sorry.
Can I try to answer? Give
Yeah, sure.
my understanding. See, since Java is compiled, the compilation will fail here. But since JavaScript is executed, the precedence, that thing will take, right? So because we have actually defined the object, the superseded object will take over. So when you get to this describe function, all the three will be defined. Is that the, maybe my understanding is incorrect?
Yeah, exactly. Because see how the constructor is, or how an object of this batsman class is created. Remember, we are making a super call here. What does the super mean? I hope if you have learned Java, you might be knowing super.
Yes,
means
sir. Yes.
You are calling the constructor of the base class.
Base class. Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you call the constructor of the base class, you know that for this particular instance, you have already defined all of the properties. That includes role, that includes name, that includes team. All of these three variables are defined. And once all of these properties are defined, then you are calling the describe function or the describe method.
Yes.
Okay, so this is basically a get method. So you don't need to use those parentheses here. So when you call it, all of these properties for this object are defined. Remember, you are calling it with p.describe. So this here is going to refer to
Okay.
p. So ultimately, you are saying p.name, p.team, p.role.
Okay. Okay. Now I understand, because I was getting confused with the context, because if you run this in Java, it will throw you an error.
Of course, yes, it won't be compiled. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the difference between compile. So then if we can just take it further, suppose I have just defined a player object and I call it describe method. JavaScript will silently ignore that this dot role. So it will say, Virat is from Indian team, is a dash. Is that nothing? That's how it will display, right?
This dot role. So you are creating an object of player class, right?
Player class, yeah.
Okay, so
and
in
I say
that
player
case,
is
this dot
Virat
role, I guess
Kohli.
it should give you
Virat
undefined.
just say player is Virat.
It should give you undefined. I guess it should be giving you undefined here.
But it won't give an error, right? It will just say.
No, error won't come. Yes.
Yes, sir. It will give, because it will create the role. It will create the variable role, but it will not assign it with anything. So it will give undefined. Am I correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other doubts? Anyone else have?
And one small thing, sir, in the view for, like v for, we have this notation, like other than the for, we have some key notation.
Correct.
So can you please explain that notation briefly?
Yes. Okay. So see, when you are using v for, probably for a short list or probably for a short iterable, I guess using key may not be that much effective. But for example, if you are using it for a long list that has to be iterated using v for, so what key does is it basically assigns a different index or a unique index to each of those elements, so that it becomes easier for view to keep track of it. The moment you make change in any of that iteration, let's say in for one iteration, you just make change from outside the program, or let's say somewhere else from the application. So what it does is it automatically replaces or updates that component without doing anything explicitly, because since you were using key, as soon as the value of that attribute changes, view knows that the value has now been changed and it has to be re-rendered.
Okay, so it is re-rendering. Basically, whenever it is changing, it is re-rendering it.
Yes, as soon as the key changes, It will be random.
So, sir, like in case of list, it will refer to the index. But in case of, let's say, like dictionary or object,
No, key will not refer to the index. You have to provide an explicit value to key. It depends on you what value you are providing to it.
so if it is a list, then like if I just mention colon key equal to index, then will it work? Like
You
how?
have to reference that index, where that index is coming from.
Okay, so let's say list dot index, like my list.
Yes. If that list is having a list of objects and that index is one of the properties of those objects, then that is fine.
Okay. Okay, now I'm getting it, sir. Okay, and one small thing, the VHTML, if we send anything to VHTML, it will directly take it as a template.
Correct. Yes.
We don't have to like feed it from the template, let's say attribute.
Sorry, what is template attribute? I did not get it.
Sir, actually, I like mix up this keyword, the word that is used for. So in Vue, we have this data compute.
Okay. That template property. Okay.
Property, yeah, okay, yeah, template property, okay, yeah, yes, sir. It was my mistake. So we don't have to feed it from the template property. We can feed it from anywhere, and it will take it as a HTML template.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, and that is the only difference between vtext and vhtml.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone? So shall I assume that there is nothing else? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. So I can probably stop sharing. All right. Okay. So since the quiz exam is scheduled for tomorrow, I wish you all the best and hope you all will be doing good.
Yeah, and tomorrow morning, sir, just to tell everybody. It meant.
Okay. Yeah. So I wish you all the best for your exam, and let's have a discussion post your quiz exam and see what your inputs are toward the question papers about the difficulty and all.
Difficulty level will be same as the mock, sir?
No. It can even be a one notch higher than that.
Okay. Okay.
So, but how do
it
you
was
find the mock
okay,
paper?
like difficult, medium.
No, sir. Yeah, it took more time because the first three questions are really tricky.
Okay.
And I had to because every time I read it, I felt the other answer is right. So it took more time than 40 minutes actually.
Okay, so you get 45 minutes, right, for one exam, one subject.
Yes.
1 hour, sir.
Okay, you get 1 hour. Okay.
Yes.
So 1 hour for 16 questions, I guess the time is more than sufficient. I mentioned that there will be a balance of theory and programming questions. So I guess the programming questions may take a little bit of more time, but if you are having the same number of theory questions too, that can be answered in no time, I guess. If you know those concepts.
Tricky is okay, sir, but the thing is, like I was going through a previous year question, so there in one of the Vue components, some attributes were used, like blog or something. It was very difficult to understand what was written in the, like what the syntax was. That kind of question is like a little bit problematic.
I believe that the quiz one exam won't be that much difficult, but yeah, as we will progress with the syllabus, and by the time quiz 2 exam will happen or the ensign exam will happen, you will experience more difficulties in the QPs as the scope of things become much wider. yeah, this exam, I believe that if you have just learned the basics of JavaScript and basics of Vue, this should be more than sufficient for you to score more than 80%, I would say. All right, so let me stop the live streaming too.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I have to stop the recording.